Hi, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of the Noona's Noonchi podcast, where I do deep dives and reactions to some of our favorite K-dramas and, of course, K-pop. And speaking of K-pop, I'm so excited to have Haley Young here with me, reporter who covers K-pop, this is going to be exciting, and K-culture, which everyone is obsessed with, for the Korea Joongang Daily. So excited to have you straight from Korea. So we're on a time difference, but I love when I talk to people in Korea because it's like, it feels more genuine, like right. Really real, like we're really talking to you about Korean culture. So thank you for joining me, Haley.
So exciting to be here, and good morning over there.
Thank you. Yes, we're on a bit of a time difference. But speaking of which, so tell me a little bit about how you got involved with what you're doing today, covering, which I think is super fun, K-pop and K-culture.
I wasn't assigned to this specialty right from the moment that I entered this company. Actually, I had been aiming to work for some kind of news outlet writing about Korea in English, though, because I went to school in the UK and the US before I became an adult. So I basically grew up there. So majoring political science here, a lot of the conventional Koreans, I should say, they usually want to go for more of a government job, but I knew that wasn't really my field. And I always wanted to write about Korea, which I had been doing, moving around back when people knew almost next to nothing about Korea.
Super cool.
I could get more into this, but every time I move around, I can just really feel every 5 to 10 years the changing level of interest in Korea. So after applying to this newspaper as in general, and I got in, at first I started covering as a more of a trainee, different field in culture. And actually, there was someone who had to move to another department, and I got assigned to this field completely by chance, I guess.
Yeah.
But K-pop is a very crucial part of our culture department, and I was a bit known for being a fangirl myself because I was busted. I overshared the fact that I used to buy Korean and Chinese versions of the EXO albums.
Well, yeah, you gotta love K-pop if you're gonna write about it
Chinese
too.
versions.
Oh, well, that's a real fangirl. Yeah, what's the Korean term for fangirl? Gosh, I just talked about
it. Do you want the formal word or the slang version?
Oh, tell me the slang word.
Right. Usually if you're a fan, you just say pen or toku, which comes from the Japanese term otaku. Those are the tame words. The ones who are I guess like groupies, even without the Western sexual connotation, just like hardcore fans, they're called basuni. Yeah. And I think I qualified for a basuni back then. Now I'm like low energy, so I'm a moderate fan.
Me too. We have our biases. I love that word.
We do.
Right? Yes, we do. So that's awesome. So keep going. I'm sorry. And then so you kind of fell into it by chance.
Yeah, that's basically it. So there was a spot to fill, and they were like, well, I got into this newspaper in February, right after finishing another internship at ABC's Seoul Bureau. So I was like a noob, and there's, should we give this K-pop field to this noob? And I said, I used to be a basuni, and they were like, okay, you fill the spot.
That's awesome. Well, good for you. And you're right. And I want to go back to what you shared, because I think it's important, because people who watch this Noona's Noonchi podcast are not, obviously, they love K-dramas, but they're all about K-culture. You just told me every 5 years you're noticing the interest in Korea shifting. Tell me more about what you meant by that.
Oh, there's so many just symbolic moments. And it's gonna contain a bit of shade. So when I moved to the UK, it was 2003, right? What was it? Right after the Korea hosted the World Cup, barely coming out of obscurity.
Right.
And the people in the neighborhood were so nice, and I have really mostly good memories there. But in class, it was draw your flag day. It was still a pretty diverse town even then, especially a lot of Indian, Pakistani descent classmates. So we were all drawing our flag. Someone asked me why I was drawing Pepsi's logo, which, to be fair, valid point.
Sure. Yes. Right. Wow. I've never heard that. I'll be honest with you. Wow. Pepsi's logo.
But it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does. The colors. Yeah.
So, and just, north or south is just not even funny anymore. It's just like kind of like a ritual. It was like that,
Uh,
if anyone knew about Korea at all, it was very, I guess, a very superficial image. If they had an image at all, actually. I think
Sure.
2003 is before they even had this image of K-dramas.
Totally. No, I mean, I
Right.
mean, there's some beautiful K-dramas that are coming up before 2003, but the world didn't
Of
really know.
course, yeah, but
Yeah.
it wasn't part quite the Korean wave Hallyu
Wow,
back
you're giving me a
then.
great timeline. This is 2003. It's not that long
Right.
ago.
And the reason that my dad's also sometimes in news articles, so I can expose him like this too. We moved around because he's a director at the Korea Tourism Organization. So he
Mm-hmm.
was the one exporting a lot of the K dramas and, working to host K cons in the city he was assigned to work in. That's why we were moving around these random cities
Sure.
around the world.
Yeah.
So I remember in England when he used to host those events, there were some people, but relatively low level of interest that I could feel as a child. So I was kind of like a forced to attend audience member, basically, to like fill in a seat.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved back three years later, but exactly 10 years after I moved to the UK, that was when I moved to the US, and it was 2013, which you can remember Gangnam Style was just the only
Oh,
thing everyone
yes.
knew about Korea. I
Yeah.
guess it was good that there was at least one thing that most of the world knew about Korea at that point. I
Sure.
think 2013 was still before the age of K-pop and K-drama,
Oh, it
so
was before
it
BTS, before BTS really blew
before
up.
BTS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, BTS is just so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
BTS debuted in 2013, but they were barely
Yeah,
gaining fame in Korea. Like it was already
that's
a
true.
very steep competition. So
Yeah.
when I went there, the only thing everyone knew about Korea was Gangnam Style.
That's so funny. It's funny, but it did put us on the map a little bit, going,
Right,
oh,
right.
this
I
guy's
think a lot
Korean.
of these cultural things really start with the superficial things, and I think in the early stages it could start with stereotyping,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's just benign or just bad stereotyping, but it
Hmm.
did put us on the map, right?
True. It did.
So I remember explaining to some of the kids who asked like what Gangnam meant and like what it meant in Korean society. And I remember I like when I was thinking about writing my cover letter, why I want to talk about Korea. I remember telling them the song was funny to Koreans. Obviously, a fat Asian guy dancing in Korea is not that funny, right? To like compared to Westerners watching like a guy who looks like Kim Jong Un supposedly dancing. And I
Right.
told them Psy was already well known, but this song is just especially funny because Gangnam is supposed to be this like upscale, like rich, fashionable town, and this
You
funny
have
guy,
him. Yeah.
right? I mean,
And he's making fun of
he's
himself,
he's
basically.
well loved for his figure, but he dressed ridiculously to exaggerate like that figure and that image. To come up with this like unfashionable crude image with Gangnam, that's what made it funny in Korea, like
Yes.
completely differently
It
from the
was like an
Western
inside
context.
joke for Koreans. They got it.
Right,
Right.
right. But no one knew what Gangnam itself meant, or even oppa back in. It's crazy that no one knew what
True.
oppa meant back then.
No,
It's
I know.
crazy.
Now it's so now like the most common word in America. Opa,
Right,
pardon me.
right. It's actually it's been registered on the Oxford English Dictionary
It
now also.
has.
Right.
Yes,
So
of
we don't
course.
have to italicize some of the 20 something words that were newly added on the
Mhm.
dictionary. It's
I think
crazy that
26,
it's
right?
no
26
longer
words.
like a foreign word to
I know. Isn't
italicize.
that fascinating?
Right. So I think that fascination looking back, then like I started writing my cover letter about why I want to do this, like why I want to specifically write about Korea in English rather than going to like I don't think I would have pursued Korean journalism.
Hmm.
I don't think that would
Okay.
have been my field.
And tell me a little bit more why, because you wanted to write in English for what's like your passion about presenting, talking about K culture and K-pop in the English language.
Right. So explaining them, I think there's people who naturally really like explaining. There's also words for that in like Korean. People who just like to clarify things when someone has a question, and also from a perspective that has lived in the West, I should say, and in Korea as well, because I think a lot of the times when someone moves abroad, they tend to live there, right? So
Hmm.
they either become Korean hyphenated American,
Right.
or they just spend such a little amount of time of their lives abroad and come back to Korea, so they're basically pretty much just Korean. Often very conservative, maybe not very interested in like cultural sensitivity. But I moved back and forth with exactly a decade apart. I think that was a very valuable experience for me, seeing this change. And I wanted to like the interest was obviously rising, and I wanted to explain it in a way that's from a Korean perspective, rather than a lot of the Western bureaus in Korea portraying phenomenons or events in Korea from a largely Western perspective.
Sure.
I wasn't sure that I wanted to do that. I wanted to add in like, but from the Korean point of view.
And you're going to write it in the English language that's global, that everyone could read your articles from a Korean perspective. Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, honestly, some folks, the fangirls, right? The fans would love your job, right? Who doesn't want to write about K-pop and K-culture? So speaking of which, since you've seen, and I love how you threw some shade, but that's understandable. I mean, in just a short period of time, the world has come to know Korean culture in more obvious way than we never. I mean, if we have 26 words in the Oxford Dictionary,
right?
I find that unbelievable. And I grew up in the US, but I still find it so shocking to me too. Shocking is a strong of a word, but you know what I mean, right? Like
even I feel like, is it a dream?
Yeah, is it a dream that bulgogi is in the Korean, in this dictionary? And growing up, people made fun of me for eating bulgogi,
Exactly. And now your guys paying ridiculous $30 for it. I actually have one more shade to add that I forgot.
Okay, please add it.
The fact that well, back in 2013, it's still about almost a decade ago. I wouldn't say it was cool to be Korean, but I guess, well, there's a whole hegemonic aspect to this now, and it's a whole new issue. But now, I guess, out of a lot of Asian ethnicities, Korean seems to be deemed cool, right?
Sure.
And I remember when I moved to the US, I was like 15, 16. So I was what you would call a fob, fresh off the boat, right?
Yep.
And I think I'm still Facebook friends with this person, but I met a Korean American, a born and raised Korean American schoolmate. And his last name happened to be Yang, and Yang's not a super common last name in Korea.
It's not, no.
And in Korea, last names are assigned to like a origin city. So like there's like Kim of Gwangju, Kim of Gwangshan.
I got you right. Yang. Okay.
And Yang has like 3 because there's not that many of us. So I asked us like, where's your origin city? Because that's kind of a common question for Koreans. And he told me, you can censor this out. I don't do that Bob shit.
Right? I'm not going to censor it because that's real. He actually said that to you? Okay.
Like verbatim. And then 8 years later, no, not even 8 years, last year, 7 years later, this dude is trying to go back to his Korean roots and participating in more Korean events. I see you through Facebook. I see you through Facebook. So now it's cool to be Korean, I guess.
Yeah. So I love that you share that. Go ahead.
Bittersweet.
It's bittersweet, but you know what's funny? So I'll share and I'm not even defending his angle, not at all. But I think I get that.
I understand.
Yeah, the 15, 16, but that's hurtful. That's like shading your identity, like who you are. And I got hurt too on the opposite end when I was getting to know yuhaksengs. By the way, that's international students. I went to NYU. So yuhaksengs from Korea that I was like, ooh, I want to get to know them. They're Korean like me, right? But don't forget, the cultural difference is huge, right? And
can't sit with us.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but now it's different. And now it's much easier, right? Because we've kind of meshed a little bit better. But back when I went to college in 1990s, I had to give my age, it was very distinct. When you're talking to an unni or oppa, or basically sambe, what you guys all know, everybody on Noona's Noonchi knows what that means because you hear it in K-dramas. I was very Westernized. So I'd be like, hi. Right. Oh, hi. So you're from Korea. Oh, I want to get to know you. They'd be like, Unni, you have to call me Unni. And I was like, what? And I remember when they said, oh, I'm your Unni because I'm 3 years older. or what year were you born? And I was like, I told them my year. They're like, yeah, I'm your Anni, or I'm your oppa. And I remember going, and because you're talking to a very westernized Korean, I was like,
Right.
well, I was taught that you only call them to siblings, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
people you're close to. I mean, you know what I mean? I was like, I just,
Right.
so why would I call you Anni? So on that note, I remember being a little bitter. So I'm thinking that kid
Right.
was bitter when he was talking to you because maybe he felt like he was being forced into a culture that he didn't really know. That's just my perspective.
Right.
And
Right.
but that again, we're immature because I was like 18. So I was like, what? And then I remember thinking, I'm not gonna call you Anni, but then obviously I got very close to them and it became that relationship and they and it became, they become very close. And then they
Right.
look after you. The Annis and
Mm-hmm.
Oppas and Nunas and Hyungs, they look after you,
They
right?
do.
They take care of you. And that's so special in Korean culture. So I wanted to bring that up going, that's a lesson for me where I went, well, gosh, I got to understand the Korean culture. I'm
Yeah.
Korean, but I'm not Korean. I'm Korean American.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of which, tell me some of what your favorite recent articles have been. Let's talk about your work. You're covering K-pop.
Well, there's a Korean word for your job and your fan activities being the same. It's called 덕업일치. Basically, your like 덕후 side and
Oh,
your job being the same. And I really realized how blessed I was when I attended Mama recently, the Mnet Asian Music Awards,
yes,
and especially because the number of seats were so limited because of the Omicron variant.
sure.
I really had to, open my eyes and realize that this is a blessing to be able to do this as a job, although it was
Mhm.
really cold getting there and far away.
Yes, I'm
Right.
sure. It's winter,
So,
right?
attending that was also really interesting because it was after two years of no audiences on site. But apart from that, most recently it was also about celebrity vaccinations. Right, it was a big issue during Mama too.
Hmm.
And I also really like to focus on whenever I get the chance to address, mental health awareness in K-pop and K-dramas, especially K-pop, I think, because K-dramas have been addressing mental health a lot because
Right.
they're less pressured to always portray this bright image. And I think
Hmm.
K-pop artists only really recently started getting out of this pressure that they must always be cheerful, they always have to be bubbly. And
Right.
some of them just recently some of them just go straight up to, some dark stuff. Like
Yeah, they
recently
do.
a girl group member that I interviewed debuted late October, so they're like the rookies of the rookies, right?
Hmm.
And they say during the interview on camera, like, so obviously this is part of their like core promotion identity. They say our core concept centers around facing our deepest fears and traumas and overcoming them. So that is their worldview. That's their narrative of the group. And you know, so I said, "Oh, tell me about your fears." And one said, I don't want to be ordinary. So I in the beginning I was guessing, oh, this is just gonna be one of those, like really generic fears because they don't want to go into some dark stuff. And then like the third member just goes straight up into my fear is depression.
Yeah. So they went
Yeah.
well, very
And the
honest.
hard times they faced during when they were trainees, and it was so uncertain, like how looking at other girls debut before them was like very mentally stressful. So I realized, wow, the industry has really changed even in K-pop.
I'm so glad. And I hope you do more of that because, as in mental health, yeah, you're right. K dramas are a little easier to write these trauma stories and because it's a
Right.
story and drama, but the reality of K-pop does, it is great to see that. First of all, it's great to see the shift that they can be honest about it. Remember, it's
Right.
such a stigma in our culture,
Mhm.
and taboo still. So I think the more people
Right.
talk about it, the less it becomes taboo.
Right. Especially more so in Asia rather than the West. I mean,
Yes.
even in the West, in Korea, everyone says, we should deal with mental health like the West, but I don't think that's the cure all because in the West, there's something like this. It seemed more acceptable, but still, if someone really close to you says, "I have depression, I'm on medication, I have like suicidal ideations," you'd still go, "Whoa," and get
Oh
taken
yeah. Oh,
aback, right?
definitely. And
That stigma exists everywhere.
it is oh yeah, and I love that you said that. That's interesting. You just said Koreans tend to say, "Oh, let's be more like the West or Americans talking about mental health." That's interesting. Do they feel like they look at the US and go, "They're doing it a little bit more progressively. We need to follow them"? I'm asking because when it comes to mental health, that is a big comparison that they pointed that out because I never would have seen that.
This
You
is like
know?
a regular rant I have. The problem number one is Koreans tend to look at the West as like a monolith, which can't blame it. The Western society tends to view Asia also as a monolith.
Correct.
But the thing is, if you're going to talk about the medical system, the US and Sweden will be very different. And I don't
Yes.
think people understand that over here.
Oh, I see.
Also, the second problem, I guess they think, I think this tendency is going down and I notice it, but even a few years ago, people used to think of anything Western as just hence more progressive, more advanced, and thus we should learn from it. We should do it like that, except gay marriage, which baffles me. So we should do everything like the West, but not that.
Because they're not there yet.
Right.
Maybe give them some time, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I
So,
get that.
yeah. So there was a period, I think it's still getting less, but there used to be a period where everything Western used to be seen as a cure-all.
I think that's interesting, but I'm not surprised. But then it would be baffling to me when I was growing up and we would go to Korea quite a bit. And I would feel so, they say kyopo, right? Kyopo.
Right.
Oh, you're a kyopo. And then already you're like, oh, that's bad. Right?
Right.
Because they would say it like, oh, you don't know Korean. And Korean was my first language because I was born there. But obviously when you grow up in the US and you don't practice Korean, because my parents spoke English pretty well, I didn't practice it. So I sounded foreign, right? But it's funny now that I sometimes see this dichotomy, like they look at Western culture like it's so cool or let's follow them, but then you don't quite feel that as an American though. They still go, you look Korean, Jeannie, so you should be more Korean. Does that make sense? It's like that conflict I sometimes get.
Yeah. I mean, the almost derogatory term black-haired foreigner in Korea.
That's right.
And the fact that when I came back to Korea third grade, everyone loved the idea of England, so posh, but I was actually bullied for not speaking the language as well as them, having different, I guess, mannerisms or like attitudes. So I remember being so confused. People here seem to worship England, which in my memory is just a place that constantly rains. So like, why do people love England so much? There's nothing to it. Second, why do people bully me when they love England? So I was actually shocked more here than moving abroad.
Thanks for sharing that. And you're being real about that because that's exactly what, as an Americanized Korean, encounter too, going, why?
Right.
You said America's so cool, but then you don't treat me well. Right.
Right.
So I know it's changing, I think.
Especially third grade. Oh my God.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, and that wasn't that long ago. I'm assuming you're a little younger. So we're talking a very short period of time in the last, would you say like 7 years that K-pop has, I don't know, what's the word? Exploded? Not even 7 years, 5 years? 5 years?
I would say really depends. When did BTS really get on the map?
2017?
I would say 2017 was still when it like really started going down. Like as in like things started happening, and I think
just really the last 4 years then is what you're alluding to. Like,
and I think just
nothing
in general, apart from people who already had an interest in Korea, I think Parasite was really the event that made it more general, because a lot of the K-pop events, even in Korea, K-pop is actually a niche. I think people should know that, right?
Do share. Yeah, tell them. Yeah, tell folks.
So a lot of people say in Korea and abroad, K-pop's a very niche genre. So certain people of Korea, very certain number of people listen to that type of music. It's the same in Korea too, actually. When an idol singer releases a song, pretty much only their fans listen to it. So like we call it leagues of their own. So
wow.
I've been a fan of let's say NCT's music
for quite some time.
Friends around me, they don't even know who they are, basically.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, you just assume everybody knows these
just a league of your own.
That's
so actually just yesterday I was posting so much about NCT on my Instagram when I was at Mama. And the and a lot of the people were me, oh, so I didn't know you were a fan. And then my friend the day after saw that they ranked number 1 and 2 on a survey recently and sent me that like, oh, I thought you were crazy because I thought they were like nobodies, and I was like, you're raving at this concert for like these people I've never heard about. And then she saw like a survey article that they were like the most listened to artists of 2021, and I wasn't offended because I knew that was what's going on. It's
You see my
actually a
mouth? I'm
very
shocked.
yeah, it's actually a very, very specific K-pop idol music. It's actually a very specific genre in Korea too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So then is there like a Korean artist though that everybody knows in Korea?
Honestly, I think after the 2012, 13 mark, there hasn't been an idol singer that gets their song known to the entire country. Like in 2007, Wonder Girls, Tell Me, everyone knew it, right?
Yeah.
Including politicians, right?
I remember that.
And
Yeah,
Gangnam
sure. But you're saying,
Style,
but now people, you're telling me people don't know BTS in Korea.
I mean, people know BTS.
Okay.
But almost like as a almost as just like our Lord and Savior. And it's like the people who know about Jesus but have never read the Bible. There's a lot of them. I mean, I'm also guilty. I haven't listened to all of their songs. So they know BTS is winning. They don't know which exact award they're winning, but they just know that, oh, they're
see. So they know of them and they're yeah, but they don't know their songs maybe, or even maybe how they sound.
Right. I mean, I didn't listen to Butter until like 2 weeks after it was released. Wow. But I was writing about how well it was doing, but then I was just busy with other projects. I was like, and then autoplay just hit me. And it's
no worries. No, this is a great angle to that. So that's fascinating to me because in the US, I think the day Butter was released, it's like you heard it. Do you know what I mean? And that's amazing. Don't you think that's amazing? I'm in the US and I heard Butter before you did, technically, if it came out on the day.
Isn't it because it's like it's by a group of people who are already interested and almost waiting for their release?
Sure.
I don't think some other groups might still not even know what BTS is. Like, let's say Becky in Kentucky. She doesn't know what BTS
okay, you're right. Maybe in remote places, sure. But you're right. I can see that. But yeah, NCT, I mean, I'm still surprised that someone in Korea didn't know NCT and they thought, who's this person that Haley? Wow.
She thought it was crazy. And looking back, I must have seemed crazy. Like I was just like,
and I'm not even a K-pop expert. I know. And I pretty much have heard of all the big K-pop people. I mean, obviously, because I'm in that. You're right. I'm a listener. So then of course I know that, but I just think that's funny that they thought you were like crazy. You're like, oh my goodness. So speaking of which, since I like talking about K-dramas, are you a K-drama fan?
Or do you watch K-drama? I do have to keep track because of my job. I have to admit that apart from Netflix, it's very hard for me to keep up with, the so-called terrestrial channel dramas, like ones TV? You actually have to have, like television. I have to stay glued to the TV for.
Oh, like TVN and all the ones that we see in Korea, like
right. But I still have to keep track, and I used to watch them until my college days, so I was able to observe kind of the evolution.
Yeah. Okay. So hold that thought because I want to hear about the evolution, but tell me, because we're talking about your job, why you have to keep track of K-dramas because of your job. I want to get that connected.
K-pop and K-dramas, like it's kind of a Konglish word, but we refer to them as like a whole as a K content, basically just cultural content that comes out of Korea. Well, just because, same time BTS goes viral, Parasite also succeeds, and they're usually branded as something coming out of Korea and like from the Western perspective. So just branding them together as something Korean is important. Even if they weren't connected, that would still be a good strategy.
Sure.
But they are actually interconnected because a lot of the idols go into acting.
Yep.
There was a time when idols going into acting was like perceived really negatively, or they were just like, crushed for not being able to act, allegedly. But nowadays, I really don't. I think the companies really train them to be multi-entertainers, so they have no problem going into either industry. And also, even before that, like since a long time ago, the idols used to participate in a lot of original soundtracks.
So you already know their voice.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because now that reminds me of Bollywood, actually. A lot of songs in India, I know they get promoted via the movies as like a soundtrack.
That makes
In
sense.
Korea, the song isn't part of the story, unlike Bollywood, but a lot of the popular songs come out as original soundtracks. So if there's like a really popular series and let's say relatively lesser known idol gets to get a deal to sing an original soundtrack for that series, it's like considered a career opportunity.
I see that. And I will tell you, one of the favorite things about K-dramas are the OSTs.
Yeah,
You recognize them
really
in every scene, right?
Yeah.
So no, thanks for sharing that. No, I was going to say a lot of folks that I know, I mean, maybe 50% of folks started watching K-dramas because of their K-pop stars, right? You know, you're talking about Astro or Chaonu and Rowan, right? From King's Affection and Chuno right now on Red Sleeve, all because of the K-pop bands that they follow. They're like, oh, Chuno's in a new K-drama. Of course I'm going to watch him. You know, these are, and so then they find out how good K-dramas are.
And so sometimes it works around the other way around.
That's true. It does too.
You mentioned Chaunu. Actually, with all due respect, Chaunu saw more attention like as an actor and model rather than starting off as a successful act with Astro.
Is that right? Okay.
Right.
I didn't know that. So you're educating me. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I'm that person. I was into K-dramas first before I got into K-pop, even though I remember Soteji and loved all the old 90s actors, 90s singers, 90 artists. I'm not going to go there because people are like, who are they? But I do love their music, but it was all about the K-drama OST. I'd be like, who's that singer? Got to look that person up, right? So speaking of which, you talked about the evolution of K-dramas, of what you've seen. Tell me.
Right.
What's the evolution look like?
I mean, like I would have no problem with you mentioning even the evolution of singers from the 90s. I love singers from the 90s. And
oh, thank you. Yeah.
Because K-pop history, really starts from
Shin Seung-hoon is my favorite.
Yeah. Okay. K-pop history starts from the 20s, 30s.
That's true. Really?
It goes way back, right?
Oh.
Actually, you would be surprised how many modern sounding Western songs came out in Korea in the 1920s and 30s. It was actually really interesting.
That. I believe it. I mean, because the fashion circles around.
Right.
Music does too. Yeah.
Right. But in terms of dramas, it really depends. Until the 90s, Korean dramas obviously started their history with the introduction of television. Right. I remember my mom telling us that every village had this rich house, that one rich house with a television, and all the villagers would just gather like a party in the evening to watch it. That's why back in the day, one popular show had 70% ratings.
Yeah, and nowadays everybody's watching that one show.
Considered a hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe. Speaking of the time after Korea got a bit of, capital to make really good dramas, I guess it would be from the 90s. A lot of them dealt with a lot of history and a lot of very Korean topics, very, very realistic Korean history, I guess. I'm not saying that the story was realistic. It's just that they usually featured real life people, although the stories were heavily dramatized.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a drama.
Now I can't even think of an iconic 90s K-drama that's not related to history.
Well, I remember Chejin-sil. Do you remember Chejin-sil?
Right.
Yeah, who have a tragic ending, but I remember her dramas, and that was the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, she was a 90s star.
Yeah, she was a 90s star.
She was everyone's favorite.
She was everyone's favorite, and that's how she's the one who introduced me. I mean, her Chiltu and Star in My Heart, Pyeonune Kasume.
Right.
What was her other one? But those are the two famous ones that I remember. That was iconic. 90s.
Right. I think the ones that I don't remember the titles of are more of the rom-com side, where they starred the I guess high teen stars of their age, Chejin-sil, Kim Hee-sun, who are Kim Hee-sun is actually really active in the industry still.
Okay.
Right.
I remember trying to.
So 90s is when I think this template for Korean dramas started budding, I believe, although I have almost no memory of that era.
Yeah, yes.
And
There is a
in the
template.
2000s, I think Korean content really started taking off with Hallyu dramas.
Yes.
The word K dramas didn't exist. I think the beginning was the I think Winter Story, 겨울연가,
Yeah.
and
Winter Sonata.
there's also like Winter Sonata, also
Stairway
like
to Heaven.
Fall Sonata. There was like all kinds of seasons.
Yeah,
spring,
Autumn in
summer,
My
fall,
Heart,
winter.
all of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. That's early 2000s. Yeah.
Early 2000s. And then history shows continued being popular, like the I think the King and I, and then 대장금.
Yeah.
One about the royal cook. I think
yeah, of course.
And 주몽, about the ancient Goguryeo dynasty, like the three kingdoms
what's it
period.
called?
주몽.
Okay. Yes. I know that one.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. You're
I think
drawing a blank because I don't know the Korean words as much as I know.
I'm struggling too. I thought I did a lot of research working here, but some of them I know the Korean title, or I don't know the English version.
English title. Yeah.
So I remember specifically some of these because I remember my dad going on business trips to sell and promote these to Iran, right? And I believe in the beginning it started gaining more popularity in Asia and the Middle East before it reached the snobbier Western audiences.
Sure, definitely, right? Because it's much more distant of that culture.
Right,
what is this? Yeah.
But I also remember asking, in 2009, I think, I was like, why are you going to Iran?
Yeah, right. But I think that's closer culture than the westernized culture, right?
And he was telling me Iran just loved 대장금 and 주몽.
I could see that. And
also more appropriate clothing in their culture.
That's correct. I was just gonna say the culture and the conservatism. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that made
now you're making me want to watch these again because they were the classics.
I'm actually starting to feel this urge to go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole later tonight.
That just tells us how much we love our history too.
I'm a sucker for history shows. Period dramas are my favorite. Right. Which I'll get into later. Mr. Sunshine. I did not watch Mr. Sunshine because I know, right?
I'm kidding.
I'm going to mention them in a future article, but that's what I'm actually going to talk about. How heavily dramatized should we go for? Which the premise of Mr. Sunshine, I remember it was very, very creative, I guess is one way to put it. So I remember losing a bit of interest when I read the description about Lee Byung-hun's character and how he winds up in Korea, which is unrealistic in terms of history.
Sure. Right. Oh, totally. Yeah. If you look at the realistic lens, completely not possible. But then, but I think it made so that particular one, just so you know, from folks that I talked to that are non-Korean, started getting fascinated. Non-Koreans are like, what? Tell me about this rich Korean history that has a oppressive history too, right?
Right.
And so I think it's kind of neat when they're like, I got to read about the Japanese, and the Japanese oppression and all that. I'm like, I do not know this, but I guess I grew up knowing a little bit more about Korean history from my parents, and learning about it. But anyways, I interrupted you, but yeah, that's this just makes me realize the evolution is, and then now you have Itaewon Class, by the way. I don't know if you saw them, a very progressive. You have a transgender character who I think was fabulously done, and then Black, or he was Guinean, or a Black character. So tell me about, do you feel like Koreans are progressing in a way that you would like to see when it comes to the dramas and everything?
Some people might have a problem with, I do not think so. In fact, I think Itaewon Class, it has a lot of meaning in the fact that it introduced a lot of unique characters. The thing is that by setting the location, it actually limited those characters to belonging to Itaewon in some sense. And
I see.
Korea already had it. If you visited Itaewon, you know what I mean. A lot of the Koreans who don't belong in this box, this standard, they're considered to be more acceptable in Itaewon. And I know for a fact a lot of Koreans visit Itaewon almost like I'm sure they don't mean it in this way, but it's almost to go look at a freak show, right?
I've seen that and I've heard that. Yeah.
Right. So
I see what you mean.
introducing those diverse characters as part of the, as like as characteristic of a specific region that is already known to be kind of a freak show. I don't know how
see. So
progressive
that was,
that is.
oh my goodness, great perspective. So, right.
Mhm.
So it's just almost like that's a given. They could have done it
Right.
somewhere in like Seoul or Gwangju or whatever. I'm just
Right. It's almost like, Wonderland class and everyone, oh, this goes on in Wonderland. Interesting place.
Yes, I hear you. Wow. So you would you would hope to see a little bit more, more progressive themes, it sounds like, or just more, I don't want to speak for you, but tell me more of like what you hope to see in the K-dramas coming out. Cause we have quite a few. I mean, this is 2021.
Yeah.
And Squid Game.
Oh, there's a lot more, slated in advance, right?
Mhm.
I mean, 2000s were, I guess, they were like budding, but I think 2010s is when we start seeing like more progressive themes, right? I think the first one that really dealt with mental health was in 2014. I think it was It's Okay,
That's Love.
Phenomenal soundtrack. I still listen to.
Yeah.
It was an amazing series, especially, about I think guy having schizophrenia, and the word schizophrenia is just so taboo.
It is, and it's a severe mental illness.
Right, it's a severe mental illness, but I mean, even today it has a stigma here that they basically should be locked up. But I think handsome Choi In-sung playing a schizophrenia helped at least register it in the minds of people that this is what happens, right?
Right. Yeah, you're right.
So
that was the first one, right? And then after that, it was like a lot of others too. What's so funny from a clinician's standpoint? I loved It's Okay, That's Love. It's a great one, but I didn't love it for the mental illness. It's just like you as a reporter, you want more. I wanted it a little bit more. I thought it was well done. They at least talked about schizophrenia and OCD and some of her traumas, right? And she's a clinician herself. But then I was like, are they dramatizing it too much? Is like that, but then I guess it did its job. It kind of brought it to the forefront. So I let that go.
And that's kind of like the compromise I also have within me about history dramas. No matter how heavily dramatized they are, I still appreciate them for at least, maybe it's not accurate, but at least it gets people aware about this period, like the colonial period, the Joseon period, that otherwise they wouldn't hear about. So even if it's completely fiction, I still appreciate.
Like, well, at least they yes. So I'm like you with that. I'm like, well, people are talking about mental illness and looking it up. So okay.
It's like a compromise. But like as you asked me, it will be so much better, I guess. Well, history dramas, that's the conclusion that I reached. But for dramas like Itaewon Class, I want to see shows where I think the first Korean series to really like deal with homosexuality was in around 2011, which was met with the heavy backlash of the Christian community in Korea. It was like insane.
Which one?
They couldn't even film anywhere.
2011, which one?
I think wait, let me do a
look it up, because I'm like 2011. Let me think. 2011 homosexual character. Coffee Prince. Well, no.
Well, that was actually about a boss not going through the documents properly, and
never mind. That wasn't a real. That wasn't.
It's Personal Taste in 2010.
Although, yes.
It's not really about a gay character.
2010, even though,
And there was I don't know how to I completely forgot, but I know there was this series that they couldn't even find a place to film because it was about, if I remember correctly, it was about two gay men. I think it was around the 2011 mark. Two gay men trying to elope and just at least verbally kind of like marry each other in a chapel or a church, I think, and no chapel or church would allow that. So there was like,
oh gosh, I gotta look up that K-drama.
I have to look this up, but I like
that's pretty progressive for 2011. I remember Personal Taste.
Korean dramas and K-pop sometimes have these like, it's not linear. It has like these whoa moments of like, whoa, like this belonged in this year, like this came out this year, right?
Right. I missed that completely. Of course, maybe I was upset. 2011 reminds me of was it City Hunter, whatever popular drama I was more obsessed with.
I think it was definitely around 2011.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let me know later, because I can tell viewers.
Gay dramas. That's the thing. When a gay character comes out in a gay drama, it's a gay drama.
Right.
So
yeah.
when like
the whole thing when it shouldn't. Yeah.
If it's, let's say, an unwed mother, it's the show, it centers around like being on a single mom. So
Yep.
I want to see, let's say, like just like a conventional story, like a generic storyline can be whatever. And let's say lawyer just happens to be gay and the neighbor just happens to be a single mom, and they
Sure.
don't really probe into, I mean, like the show's played a good role in like letting people know what it's like to be like a single mother, or like the discrimination they face as for homosexuality. But after that, we can't make that the only theme
Yeah,
of
we
like a
can't
whole
write
drama.
like
A
yes,
character
I
just
see what
has
you're
to
saying. You want to
happen to be something, right?
right. You want that to be just I guess intersected in well. I think that's
Right.
the best word for it. I hear you. I mean, Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha had that as well. They had a gay
Right.
character that was barely, but kind of flowed with it. And I thought that,
Mhm.
oh, okay, that's a little differently done. It didn't define her, and she's talking, and it was like normalcy. That's probably where we need to see it going, you know?
Right. Just like
Cool.
in American series, like I don't want an Asian character. Representation is great, but I don't want it to be like, oh, look at my Asian family doing Asian traditional
Right.
events in my Asian
With an
household.
Asian
It's just
accent.
like,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's just like let's say a doctor steps in, she's just Asian, and
Mm-hmm.
the story just goes on. Like
Right.
she just
It's
happens to be Asian.
exactly. I hear you. Right. And I love that. And I think hopefully we'll see that more in 2022 K dramas. I think it's
Right.
getting there. But
Mhm.
anyways, gosh, I could talk to you forever. So on a certain note, I guess this might be a little bit of a heavier topic, but what do you think of, because I know recently I talked to you about, and I think I connected you with you after the Kim Sono,
Right.
what's that like in Korea in the sense of cancel culture? Like, do you think is it still so extreme? Because I'm seeing it shifting.
Right. Um, there's the term K-nets
Mm,
that kind of refers to people, like basically cancel culture, and I think it's just like a term to further make it more specific to Korea. While similar types of cancel culture exists everywhere in the world,
yes,
especially
yes.
like if you look at YouTube dramas in the West, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
And
we have it. Oh, totally.
right,
Cancel culture is
but
everywhere.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes the attitude of so-called K-nets rub people the wrong way, because there certainly are some distinct strong values innate in us Koreans, like more Confucian family values, stuff like
Right.
that. And I think it also includes a certain level of internalized sexism, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
internalized racism too.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the backlash might be on a different context from other people's reactions, but I still think
Uh,
it's valid. It's just coming from a different culture.
hmm. Okay.
Um, I wrote like a very extensive article, or slash rant, if a rant, if I want to admit it. I like ranted about it. A lot of the people are saying, okay, nets are at it again, canceling Kim Sun Ho for some private business, right?
Yeah.
Just not, that's nothing. It's just like they agreed to, but the thing is, like, if you look at the context and how the internalized values make a lot of Koreans look at and treat women who went through an abortion,
Hmm.
without knowing that context, you can't just dispel that as private matters, and like, people
Sure.
are overreacting. It's the fact that it didn't matter to me that it was just him. It could have been anyone. The wider context is that he was able to walk away from that just because it was consensual, which is great, and which is necessary. Otherwise, it
Sure.
would be a straight up crime, right?
Right.
I mean, it's good that
So
the
you're talking
truth
about the
came out,
actual issue of
right?
women and abortion.
Right. So the fact that he didn't force her, the truth is really important. That it, like him clearing his name was great for him,
Mm-hmm.
but I like, regardless of him being able to walk away with virtually no damage, I keep mentioning that there I can't remember. I like there's a lot of female celebrities had to like take a break forcibly for years because of like leaked sex tapes, which is straight up sex. They're victims of sex crime, but they were blamed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And regarding abortion, I can't think of a single female who has recovered from an abortion scandal. Probably because
Um,
none have been found out yet, and I believe it. They looking at the statistics, there's no way they haven't been through abortions. It's just that they're working so hard to keep it a secret. looking
Yeah,
at our
I
abortion
see.
statistics, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
no way. And also I don't think any of the female celebrities could have had the same outcome and the recovery speed as Kim's reputation,
Sure.
which is
Right.
why it just
Right.
left such a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, no, I saw your perspective and I wanted to hear that from you. Yeah.
Mhm.
So no, I appreciate that. You're right. I mean, there's basically nothing's linear and there's no one perspective and there's dualities to every experience. I call it like parallel processes to everything happening, but
Right,
people don't always see that,
right.
and that's always an unfortunate thing. So no, I appreciate that. I didn't mean to change it this way. And then I think just wrapping things up, because this has been
Mhm.
I'm going to have you back because you're going to do some, I'm sure 2022 is going to be even a more phenomenal year
Right.
of what
I
it's going
also
to look
can I
like.
add in one more thing about the
Of course.
abortion issue.
Oh, yes, yes,
I
yes.
so in April 2019 is when the Korean Supreme Court ruled the abortion ban unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
The actual law ruling abortion as legal started this year, January
Yes.
1st. So there was like a kind of a gap period where like the
Yes.
law and the reality didn't match. And I remember in 2019 April, the day before the announcement, the campus was like you could visibly feel the tension on the campus of Yonsei.
Sure.
And there were a lot of those a lot of the Korean students communicate their thoughts via large posters glued to the wall of the library's front gate.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them, and they still do, they call women who went through abortion as baby killers, murderers. And like, since when does women's rights mean murder, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in Kim's case, only legality seems to matter, and no one calls him a baby killer just because it
Ah,
wasn't illegal when
interesting.
he did it. So when it's
Right.
done by a man, only the legality or if it's illegal matters. But when a woman gets in it, all these moral judgments come in with the legal factor.
Wow,
I
thanks for
think it was
sharing
just,
that. So you're
yeah.
saying that still there's, even though as we're seeing sometimes a progression of women or image of women, sometimes in K-dramas that are shifting,
Mhm.
still the thought is not quite where it should be. Does that make
Right.
sense?
I've never read any comment calling Kim a baby killer.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what'd you say about that?
I've read many comments still calling like news about abortion as women as baby killers, but I've never read a comment that calls Kim a baby killer, which
Good
I
point.
think
I
is
don't
an
think I've seen
interesting
that
perspective.
either. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's something we don't get to see here in the US as much about how women are treated, about this issue. I didn't even know this, and you're just telling me something
Right.
brand new. Wow. And speaking of which, do we know of any K-dramas that have shown abortion?
There have been plenty. Usually it ends with the woman in trouble of a forced abortion running away and then popping up 10 years later and saying, "This is your son."
Mm,
It's like a
that's
cliche.
true. I'm just trying to think. I've seen it in movies, I feel like, but
Oh
now
yeah,
it's
yeah.
making me think that's the theme we have not seen as much, you know?
Right. It's
Got me
usually
thinking.
like a powerful family trying to get rid of a baby and the woman
Yes,
manages to
right.
escape and says, "I protected my baby."
Right,
I don't
right,
think
right. I know
anything
I'm
dealt
drawing a
with.
blank because I know that they're
Yeah.
there, but I'm like, I can't think. But no, thank you. Thank you so much for this. Is enlightening. This is like a trip down memory lane in the sense of Korean culture too, that I'm eager to hear about because things have changed so much. So I can't wait to have
Right.
you back to talk because I bet you this time next year it's a whole different look. You never know. I don't know.
Right.
No one's gonna make fun of you anymore for going to NCT and loving NCT.
They still might, honestly.
What? I'm
If
just so shocked. That's so funny. And I even I'm like obsessed with their songs. But that's it. Any last words that you'd like to share to my audience?
I
Anything?
think I could keep talking with you for like until 3 a.m. honestly,
We'll have
right?
to do it
Even
again.
just
I'll
covering
have you
90s
back.
history. Yeah,
I'll do a
yeah.
state of K culture and K content next year to say how's the 22 look. Thank
Right.
you, Haley Young, for coming. By
Thank
the
you
way,
so much.
Young, where is your family? Where's your family location? When you're like, what's the Young that you're from?
Oh, I'm from my last name is from Namwon, which is in South Cholla, which is actually still aligned with the area that my dad's side of the family is. So I
Oh,
haven't really
gotcha.
gone far. I'm still
Wow.
in modern
Okay.
times.
Yeah, I gotta, you know what? Now you're making me think. I gotta find out because my maiden name is Pe. I'm a
Hmm.
Peshi, so I gotta find out where I'm from.
Yeah, there probably aren't a lot of um differences, right? But
I
Pei is
mean,
not
Chung,
super common either.
I mean, my husband's name is Chung and it's Korean, but it's so well known. I'm like,
Chung's really common.
I should have kept my maiden name. Sometimes I joke going, Jeannie Bae was so cool being Pei. My Korean name is Pei Yujin. I'm like,
Yeah.
But growing up, I didn't like it. Why would I want to be Pei Yujin? Yujin is.
But you could be a Bae.
I know.
Like
And I gotta
Noona
find
and a
out.
Bae.
I'm not a Bae. I know. I love Bae. And every time people are like, oh, you are a Peishi. I'm like, oh, that's not. Oh, yeah. I should have kept it. I'm thinking it's Gwangju or something. I don't know. That my father's history is in the South. Really, he had a Satsuri growing up.
Yeah.
Now he has a Seoul accent, I guess. But yes, I got to find out more. But anyway, thank you so much, Haley.
Thank you so much for having me
Please come
here.
back and we'll keep in touch. Bye.
Let's keep in touch. Bye.
You can listen in on platforms such as Spotify, Pandora, Google, and Apple, but also watch the podcast on our Noonchi YouTube channel every Monday where it launches at 6 p.m. Eastern.